I'm so excited on the Brand to Fan show to welcome a friend of mine who I have followed his career, and he has been an inspiration and a mentor to me since I first saw him on stage at a little event in Orlando that I'm sure we're going to talk about. I'm so excited that Jake McKee is here on the Brand to Fan show. Jake is known as the community guy. He runs Jake McKee Consulting. This is a consultancy focused on helping organizations ensure that online spaces where customers connect are positive and effective, both for the community members and for the company. And he's also the founder of Dinner5, a monthly program that fosters connection, conversation, and camaraderie amongst community managers. Jake is also the founder of AnsiView, which he sold to PricewaterhouseCoopers in 2012. And after he left PwC, he ran this small group called the Apple Global Support Communities, which, as you may know, is one of the largest online communities in existence. And I actually met Jake in mid-2008, I think it was, at this little event he co-produced called Blog Orlando. At the time, I was only a few months into my role as the fan engagement and social media coordinator at the PGA Tour. And I was so excited that there was a blog event I could get to. So little 23-year-old me packed up, drove down to Orlando, and spent the weekend soaking up incredible insights from Jake and his friends. Fast forward at least 15 years later, and here we are sitting together. Jake, I told you before we got on, but you were kind of one of those guests that I penciled to the top of my list. Like, if I could talk to anybody on Brand to Fan, I would love to talk to you, but I've got a lot of work to get there to kind of prove my mettle. And then speaking to the person who you are, you caught wind of this and was like, yeah, let's connect. So here you are in one of the first episodes of the Brand to Fan show. And I could not be more thankful and happy to have you join us.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Congratulations on the new, maybe not by the time this launches, podcast.
Jake, you have done community and almost your whole digital career. Is that right?
Yeah, in some form. I always joke that I've been doing community since that meant convincing clients to put an email address on a website. Because back in late 90s, when we were building websites for clients and this was all brand new, we'd literally tell them, hey, put some way to contact you on there. Let's put your email address on there. And I had a surprisingly large number of clients, much more than one client, say, what happens if they contact us? You reply? I don't understand the question, but that was the early days of beginning to understand the customer company community connection.
Yeah. What is the essence, even now in 2023, I can imagine, and I know that you talk to people and I talk to people who maybe don't know fully what community management or online community encompasses. What's the essence? What's the root of that for you?
Yeah, what's the essence of community management? In many ways, it's a broad statement of the processes, the activities, the programs that you as a company put in place to help guide your relationship with your customer, and guide it to some place that actually creates depth and meaning, identity, emotionality. Things that we don't typically talk about when it comes to business and customer relationships, right? But the reality is, it's one thing to put in place an advocacy program that awards somebody $15 every time that they do an Amazon product review. Well, that's cool, and sure, people like making $15, but there's no emotionality inherently built into that, right? So I talk a lot about in the work that I do, a lot this issue of how do you create deeper connection, right? How do you make sure that there's a reason why somebody's excited about your products in the first place, beyond just that they do the function they're there for, right? I want to show up and participate because I know the people at the company. At least I know some people at the company. Whether all of them or not, that's a whole different story, but I feel like I have a connection to the company. I feel like I'm not just buying a product and getting a thing in return, right? I'm having a relationship, I'm having a connection. There's something about me engaging, not spending money, engaging with the company that I'm engaging with, that gives me back something in return, right? That there's a growth in my identity, that I can say, I'm the kind of person that, I'm the person who has, I'm the person that does. because that's making it about me and who I am. And if you make it about me and who I am, boy, the things that we can do together, right?
Mhm.
Because I don't want to, you know, I have been, even through these trials and tribulations that Southwest is having right now, I've been a avid fan of Southwest for years now, because their point system allows me to do stuff that is amazing, right? My partner Lacey and I can go just about anywhere because I use my credit card, I use my business flights all on Southwest, which means I get enough points that I can fly anywhere. And because I've got enough points, they give me the companion pass that puts her on
Mhm.
any plane that I go on for free, which means we get to do a lot of traveling together that we wouldn't otherwise get to do. American doesn't offer that. United doesn't offer that. Not even Spirit offers that, right? Nobody really gives me that level of opportunity. And so, you know, because I have this connection, it helps me do things with her, which is part of who we are as a couple, as who I am as a person. And you know, it's even through what's just happened with Southwest. I'm extending grace and loyalty that I probably wouldn't otherwise with somebody else. I'd think twice next time. And this time, you know, I'll give them trust and say, this was a bad mistake. It really is going to cause some fallout in how they approach their business moving forward for the next number of years. But for me and them,
Mhm.
we're cool. I'll give you some grace, fix it, do it, do right by me, and we'll be cool.
Okay. Well, you jumped right into kind of that example of Southwest Airlines in as we record this, we're only a couple weeks removed from kind of that holiday debacle where they
Mm,
literally almost canceled a whole week's worth of flights
right.
to reset their system. And what's come out from internally from employees or past employees there has been kind of the finger pointing of moving from their founding value system to a more like ROI and financially driven value system, which created the gaps that led to
Mm,
um, those things. So, but I also, as I'm working through brand to fan and this idea of marketing for affinity rather than just attention, one of my ahas, and you just spoke to it, was that our best customers actually don't transact in dollars and cents or in euros or pounds or anything like that. They actually
mm,
transact in loyalty and advocacy. And you just said that you're a huge loyalist of Southwest Airlines.
mm.
So putting your experience aside and what, you know, that reputation of brand love, LUV, has been a little bit tarnished. How does Southwest Airlines use the principles of community to regain trust with their customers like you?
Yeah, and I'll take objection to one thought, and we can play with this for a second, and then we'll talk about the answer to your question. But you know, you said that the idea of their, you know, love, as they call it, the LUV, which is the, for anybody who doesn't know, it's the airport code for the Dallas Love Field. It's LUV, um, but it's also kind of what Southwest as a company always talks about, you know, kind of the embodiment of their spirit of customer first. Um, and I don't know that how much that idea has taken real tarnish.
Okay.
I think that their reputation as a provider who can actually show up and get you there when you need to be there certainly has. Um, how much, you know, I'm not entirely convinced that the idea that they don't actually love customers, that they're not on board with helping out with what customers need and that sort of thing, is true or accurate. You know, I think that if you love them for the fact that they were a much more fun company, right? That when you got on the plane, all their staff was very friendly, much more so than a lot of their competitors. That they did the hilarity of, you know, the intercom announcements being fun, and you know, finding ways along the journey that they can make it enjoyable.
Mhm.
You know, they haven't changed anything about the companion pass. I just talked about how much I love, and you know why that drives me to have loyalty. Um, and you know, as of this about an hour ago, I redeemed the code that I had for 25,000 free points because my kid was actually caught up in that mix of trying to get back from grandparents' house, and flight was canceled, and you know, and they got in the next day. Fortunately, we happened to catch a flight for him, but boy, it was a just barely situation. But not only did they refund, they also gave us 25,000 points, which is more than enough for another round trip ticket, right? Um, and they did that quick.
Good.
And I'm pretty sure that they had some sort of third-party vendor throwing that site in place to be doing those redemptions. But I submitted that claim, and 30 minutes later, they had said, "Yep, all good. It's in your account." Right. So, they're doing what they need to do, and I think this is part of the challenge that we often hold entities, whether they're people or companies, we hold them to a standard of perfection when we don't know them. So much of this is the community vibe of, how do we extend grace? How do we come out and this isn't just the PR getting out in front of things with the right scripted message. It's about saying, oh God, we messed up. Here's how we're going to fix it. And then sticking to that, of course. But really focusing on a much more personal approach, right? That's community. And I think so many times we in the community nerd business start talking about community, and we lose track of or other people perceive us as talking about community as only a very specific, limited thing of we're building online forums and making sure that community management is about managing those things that happen in that forum, right? Making sure it's safe, making sure people are engaging, getting new people in. All that's part of it, but also how are we getting product feedback out and walked through the company, not just out of the community and dumped in somebody's lap, but how do we really take that into the rest of the community, into the rest of the company, and find the product development team that needs to hear this, and then make sure they understand it. How are we translating between company and customer, right? How are we getting the fans, the community members to participate in all the channels that exist, whether it's Reddit, Facebook, or our own official community. When somebody says, "Hey, I got a problem," and that we know that there's somebody out there that can answer it, how do we encourage them to do it? Not just to offset our support costs, which is part of that, but to get a sense of camaraderie, right? To give a success, a win to that person who gets to answer, to give a different kind of win to the person who asked and got a very quick and very in-depth answer on something very specific that there might not be a KB article for in the support system, right? These are all things that is part of this mix of community that adds into the spirit, right? The idea of what Southwest is so good at, remembering the love part, right? That we may make mistakes, and that's okay, but us. We've been here with you. You recognize maybe some of our flight attendants from other events. They're fun. They do their best to stay in a good mood when everybody else is in a bad mood, right? And because we believe that they're real people, extend the grace, which means loyalty is easier to create and to, more importantly, to hold, even when things like this disastrous week that Southwest had. It doesn't really fundamentally alter anything as long as they follow through. This goes back to my everybody goes home happy mantra that I talk so much about, right? It's this balance of making sure that the company knows what the customers want and the customers know what the company wants, and that both of you are talking openly about what those things are and whether you're meeting them or not. And it's not enough, and this is where a lot of companies fall down and put the PR team on something where something goes wrong, and they put out that PR team and with a specific political oriented message, so to speak, and that's it, they're done.
Yeah.
Instead of following through, make sure that these changes get addressed, that they're talked about ongoing, that they're shared openly, that the problem is not just admitted to in a PR spin sort of way, but admitted to in a, and here's what we're going to do about it kind of way, right? Those are the things that create that loyalty. And to me, that I define that as the community mindset, right? It's a much bigger way to holistically think about what your company's doing with customers and how you are developing operational process against that. That to me is community management. It's also why community management, I believe, should be and is positioned in an amazing spot in the organization, one that isn't really thought about, maybe respected enough at this moment in time,
Sure.
for many reasons.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's really fascinating, and to think about community as being unpacked and not just siloed into on the online forums or the people that go online, but it gets unpacked as part of the operations, as part of the essence of the brand and how that works. And I really love how you spoke to that. I've been thinking a lot about kind of what these ripples of affinity and advocacy look like. And, it might start with an experience, but like you said, as soon as you have a personal experience or you have a personal connection, some sort of emotional moment, to me,
Yeah.
those ripples kind of get bigger and bigger in the pond, and they start to interconnect with other people's ripples. And so you create, if you get enough ripples, you get a wave effect. And that wave effect, I think, can be kind of that really powerful loyalty piece of that. So I think that is really, really cool. Is there anything else that people or businesses get wrong about community, and not just siloing it or not just kind of using it for one thing, but when you talk to your clients and they have a problem specifically they're trying to solve, what's the thing that typically they're getting wrong?
Yeah, it's a it's a good question, and I think it's undervaluing the impact that properly respected community activity, community management can have on the organization. And so a couple of words I used in there, right? One is the impact. Could be many types of impacts, right? It's not, again, just isn't just about in this specific channel we're maintaining safety and security. That's part of it, but that's one impact. In some ways, the most minor of impacts. The other part is that community teams are not being respected enough. And what I mean that in a number of ways, one of which is they're underfunded, understaffed, under-resourced, under-respected, right? I joke, I've been talking for the last couple of years, as my holy jihad soapbox, that we as an industry need to stop moderating from the beach, right? If we want a vacation, we need to be working towards ensuring that we have a structure underneath us and a management support that will allow us to go on actual vacation. Because if we're moderating from the beach, what we're telling everybody is don't bother respecting us or our position. This isn't that important. It's easy enough for me to do on my vacation. Not that this is incredibly important, and we need to have backup systems in place. And those backup systems should be easy and frequently able to be used so that we can take breaks that we need for our own mental and physical health, not just as employees, but as people on the front lines of community that deal with customers all day long. You need some breaks, right? And again, if you're moderating from the beach, you're telling people this job is easy, and it's not. It's very difficult, extremely
Right.
difficult. And so I think that's part of what they're getting wrong is that under respect perhaps for what the role is. Again, get back to this, the product feedback channel piece is one that I do talk a lot about, because so many people don't understand what you can gain from understanding what people are talking about. Yeah, they'll take a support view of it and say, here's the top list of issues that have come up in the community as far as break fix. Great, that's important. That's wonderful. You can use that in comparison to your call center, right? And say, those issues overlap or they don't. Why do they or why don't they overlap? Sure, that's helpful, but even beyond that, right? The product usage pieces. Why are people not using it as much as you want? Why are they only using it for 3 months and then canceling their renewing subscription? Why have they only used it 3 times and been super excited about it and then never advocate for it after that, right? Why are these things there? And I think that we can do a lot of very formal research, and I think companies like that because it's statistically valid, right? And I've often joked about community managers being customer translators. How are you using those customer translators to greatest impact, right? How are you getting the company to understand our customers are here telling us about themselves? And instead, and I will say one of the things that companies get wrong is in this really odd dynamic, they'll kind of blow off customers as weird, right? The people who are most passionate about using their products are the weirdest people to them, instead of the most interesting and fascinating people. And the Marcelo the business cat is trying to join us today. How do you use those community managers who really understand what's being said, the context with which it's being said, and allow the qualitative metrics and measures and reporting to be as important and as respected as some of the quantitative means, right? And how do you use the community as an early warning system so that when something pops up, the response isn't just Yeah, it's only two people saying that. It's fine.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
it's interesting. I got a new product that was like a Kickstarter product earlier in or sometime last year. And there's no support forums. That's the manual was like 2 pages. But what I was able to find was a Facebook group of other Lomi users. And we have troubleshooted. We have had now created like troubleshooted for each other and created a voice within the community that now, like if you have a problem with your compost bucket, now there's a process defined of like how you contact the company is willing to, if you're under warranty, they strip you out a new bucket. But those rocky steps were community driven without being moderated from the actual business, and just a group of users took it upon themselves to kind of share their experience and what was good and what was bad. And it has led to process changes. So I think it's really fascinating. Like, do you as a business or a brand, do you pay attention to the weird people who are online who are most passionate about your product, or do you look at them with favor and like how much you can learn from that? And I kind of wonder if it's not the same with your internal employees as well. Like your employees are certainly a community audience that can signal, something's not right or something has shifted for us here.
Right.
But you're right that not a lot of people pay attention to those signals.
Well, and I'll also say too, what you've just described, I think is a very important way to look at the role of community managers, in particular, community professionals, in the process of how you build and maintain your company. I've always said, my kid's 16 now, and I've said this for many years. And in fact, I said it a few hours ago today, that I am the laziest parent ever. I put a lot of work in up front so that I never have to tell them the thing again, right? Because my theory is that if I teach them at 5 years old how to do something on their own, or I start to lay down those foundations of, how they solve problems, then by the time that they get to 11, I have a whole lot less to do. And by the time they get to 20, I'm not worried about that thing, right? It just is a non-issue. The same mindset, I think, is what community management as a profession is here to do. It is not to solely maintain safety and trust, right? It is not to ensure that nobody posts anything negative. That's part of it, but even that is not really what they're meant to do. For me, it is all about trying to create a social dynamic that becomes self-sustaining. That is the goal of community management. What does that look like? To your point, that the company didn't have something in place and didn't have to solely solve it and deliver it, and then have somebody just consume that support mechanism. And then the next time something broke, they had to repeat the process. Then the next time after that, repeat the process again, and repeat forever. Instead, what we're supposed to be doing as community management professionals, in my opinion, is creating ways to build a sustainable, self-growing, self-sustained audience of participants that are inherent. We're just keeping them on the rails, right? We're not having to drive everything, every solution, every conversation. The community starts to solve it on their own because this is their product. It's our product, it's also their product, right? It is their community, it is their solutions, it is their outcomes into the world, right? And so to your point, you guys came together, you formed a group of your own. I don't know whether the company was participating or not, but either way, you're there saying, we have this problem, how do we fix it? Okay, now that we've fixed it, what would we suggest to the company to be able to improve this for next time? And if they're listening, and it sounds like they're doing a good job of it, they go, oh, okay, I hear you, I see you. We got to make a couple of tweaks because, you don't understand the full business, but in order for us to make this sustainable long-term, we've got to make some tweaks, and we did. And so now we have something that we've worked on together. Everybody goes home happy. Customer costs or customer support costs are reduced. Product experience is improved. Your connection to the product is improved. Your loyalty to the brand is improved because you guys are working together, right? And the goal is to create that self-sustaining, limitless, timeless amount of continued growth, right? And continued self-sustaining processes. Same way with the kids, right? You teach them at 5 so that you don't have to do much at 11, so you're not doing anything at 20, right? And we see this a lot with companies who are really investing in understanding what is it that motivates the user. And I'll tell you, one of the things that has surprised me, and I've been doing, I've done several brand stints, but a lot of consulting work over my career, and I am continually surprised by the level of knowledge about the product that company employees actually have.
Mm.
It is. There are times when you can put an employee. This happened at Lego. I'd put an employee and a community member together, and somebody would ask them a question about a product from just a few years ago. The community member would lay out the entire history of how it was built, what kind of materials it was, how many units they produced, what all the things you could use it with. I mean, just ungodly amounts of detail. And the company employee would go, well, it's not really my product line. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. You have to understand that, the employee working on a thing has a different set of goals and needs and what makes them happy to go home at the end of the day, versus the community member. So, it's not an inherently bad thing. But there are times when you find yourself saying, you work for this company and you are responsible for delivering this product successfully out into the world. You shouldn't be this far behind the customers.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
You need to understand how this thing works and not just the ins and outs of the mechanics of it. I don't care if a marketer understands the mechanical innards of some product, but I do want everybody in the company to understand why they're there. Why are people this worked up about this issue? When something breaks or when something changes, why are customers so angry about it? Right? When we changed the color of gray at Lego, this is still a little PTSD on this one. They changed the color of the gray, didn't really think much about it. They sell toys to boys 7 to 12, right? Most boys don't care if the colors are different. They build with red and yellow and green in one model, and they don't have any color distinction whatsoever. They're just building a thing. Okay, cool. That's not your entire product base. They're your buyer base. Your buyer base also includes people 18 plus who use Lego as a creative artistic medium,
Right.
who have spent thousands and thousands of dollars to acquire very specific types of parts through all kinds of sources, primary markets and aftermarkets alike, over the course of years, sometimes decades, that were all the same color, and now they're different. So they can't build the same models that they were building overnight, right? These things matter to them, right? And the amount of times that those sorts of customer understandings get missed because the company gets lost in the next quarter results or this product launch or what's happening is significant.
Yeah.
It
And I
happens a
think
lot.
I'm listening to you talk and I'm thinking about being a startup founder and creating a brand new business and a brand new online business. And one thing that I knew kind of from the get-go was to get involved in kind of the public forums, the Facebook groups, the Reddit boards of the people who are on one side of the marketplace, right? The sellers, but also and to hear what they have to say about what the existing platforms and to kind of do that listening. But as I'm also hearing you talk, it's reminding me that as a founder, that the product begins in my vision, but will not finish there, right? It becomes,
Hopefully.
for so many years, Twitter was a product of the community, of the people who used it. Hashtags weren't part of the original, Twitter functionality, and kind of the product grew and responded to those changes that the community asked for, and the user base. So I think that like kind of sitting in both seats, having been behind all the emails at the PGA Tour, when certain things happened between 2009 and 2013, I have a little PTSD from that, but then also being in the driver's seat to say, okay, like it starts with my vision, but mine will not be ultimately the clay, like I just provided the clay, and lots of people get to take shape. And I'm so excited to see kind of what FanWagon turns out to be, even at the end of this year, right? In 1 year away. I'd love to keep talking about Lego. I know you were there.
Well, and before you switch gears, let me add one point to that too. You as a founder may be able to start with that vision and that understanding of, this is a moldable piece of clay that will change over time. What I'll say though is, through no fault of your own, just the pure dynamics of running a business, there will come a time, probably sooner than later, probably fairly quickly, where you have very specific requirements as the CEO and as the ultimate overseer of the business, not the product, the business, where you will inherently lose touch with that user need, the user voice, right? I don't mean lose touch with it as in you're completely out of touch, right? That's not what I mean. I just mean that you're not in there day to day. You're not part of that conversation because there are so many other pulls on your time, right? You're going to have boards to deal with and VCs to deal with and developers to deal with and, you know, code deficit to manage, right? Sprints to design. I mean, all this stuff that's going to go into just maintaining the business. Perfectly fine. That's understandable. Back to the point of the community manager as the customer translator, who do you have in place that is solely responsible for ensuring that you are able to remember? And the piece that you have to watch for that a lot of people through basic human nature lose track of is what happens when you don't agree? What happens when you get really caught up in, if I don't add a feature, I can't get the board to sign off on my funding plan because there's not enough monetization there, and then the product falls apart. And at the same time, the customers are going, I don't want that. You're off. You're missing the point, right? How do you start to reconcile those two as a founder who understands customers, but also not letting yourself believe that because you once did, you always will, right? And I think that's where a lot of companies of all sizes, but you know, especially kind of that post startup into medium sized companies get really jacked up with, is that they're not huge enough to feel far away from the customer, but they are very far away from the customer, and they haven't put in place the right customer translators to really get those messages about what's needed, what's interesting, and somebody who's going to fight you for those things, right? Because you know you get into a spot very easily where, you know, again, VCs, product roadmaps, development resources all start to take on a bigger mind share of your founder mind, and there's nobody there to fight for the customer anymore.
That's a good point. And now I'm like mentally reviewing like my first 10 hires, like, okay, no, I think they're there, but I love the phrase customer translator and also community professional. I know you said that a few times in this conversation. And I think those are really good notes to take away. It's just like in your org chart, you know, where do those pieces go, and like kind of where does the feedback loops, where do those happen?
And in your culture too, you know, from day one, how another way that you can, you know, don't ever put it on one person, right? Hopefully you're putting it on one person or two people or a team to remind you of what your culture is, that you do such a purposeful job. That's been my word of the week this week, is purposeful. Purposeful job of ensuring that we know our culture, we talk about it often, we have names for it, right? This is the Southwest love thing, that when things get off, somebody can double check. And I've heard them. I've worked in those halls, and I've walked with those people who will stop and literally say, okay, wait a minute, is that in line with values?
Nice.
No, it's not. I'm going to make a different decision. You know, it's part of a holistic, you know, woven into the fabric of the organization from as early as you can get it woven in, that, you know, here's what we believe, and we're modifying it over time. You know, because if it's too out of touch with the reality of where your company is, you know, one employee and 10 employees and 100 employees are very different spaces for that company to occupy. And if you stick with what the culture was when it was 1 or 10, and by 100 you don't morph it, then it becomes so unreasonable that it's easy to ignore and move on past, right?
Yeah, thank you for that. Oh, I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's these things are always have been on my mind, and I definitely will be making some my own notes as I'm putting together the show notes of this episode to pull into that business. I would be remiss if we don't use our time together to talk a little bit about the experience that you had at Lego. I know you were there in the earliest days of the Lego community, and I think what Lego has done for their adult fans, even in this past decade, probably doesn't happen without the work that you were part of. You know, I think it's been, well, I don't want to date it, but I know it was kind of in the early 2000s. Is that right? That you were there. And so as you look at the success of kind of what's happening now, they've got the creator expert series, They've got botanicals, which my nieces got for Christmas and I was fangirling over. They have character license sets and these incredibly deep, rich, like huge mega projects that'll take over someone's kitchen table. I mean, is there something about those? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Is there something about those early days in your time with Lego community that you can identify as like, hey, we kind of put this in motion way back when?
Yeah, and so what I'll tell you, I'm the most proud of when I look at what's happening in the world today around that brand. Um, it isn't just the products, although I just showed you one this is one that I got, yeah, maybe a present or two too many for my kids. So I kind of left this one aside for myself. And I'm super excited about building it and putting it on my desk at work, right? But the things that the two big things that I'm proud of are not the product assortment. They're the fact that the work that we started that has now continued on, again, back to laziest parent ever, right? What we changed was the idea that Lego was a toy company for boys 7 to 12.
Mhm.
It's not, it's a creative medium. And I talked for years and years and years, really the whole time I was at Lego, I talked about, and my mantra was, Lego is a creative medium. Because if I can get you to believe it's a creative medium, I can get you to advocate, I can get you to share, I can get you as any type of user, whether you're a grandparent buying for your grandkids, whether you're an educator buying for your classroom, an adult buying for yourself, an adult buying for your kid, a kid buying for other kids, whoever it is, the world opens up if you believe that it's a creative medium, not a toy for boys 7 to 12. The way that we deliver to some of those audiences is a kid's toy for boys 7 to 12. Some of them are, this amazing bonsai kit for adults
Yeah.
and anybody else who's really hardcore interested. The kits are a way to promote that message. So, we got that point across that we pounded away on that in our community team and especially with me. We pounded that message over and over and over again, to the point that it started to take on a life of its own, and now it just sort of lives as truth, right? It wasn't truth when I started, which was the other point, very related but somewhat separate, is the point of pride is the growth of the expansion of the embrace of nerd culture, right? So when I started at Lego, it was, you'd walk into an office building anywhere in the world, and maybe you'd find a Lego model on a desk somewhere. And if you did, that was probably the guy that everybody looked at and said, yeah, that's the weird guy in the office. He brings toys and puts them on his desk, right? Today, walk into just about any office building anywhere in the world, you're going to find a lot of Lego, and it's going to be super cool and celebrated, right? The same way that, we're starting phase 5 of the Marvel universe, with billions of dollars of revenue, and I think about 750 movies that came out this year alone. A lot of stuff going on with that, that one piece of nerd culture, right? Much less all the rest of it. And the embrace and the acceptance of that, the joy of buying cool, fun toys, right? That I've got somewhere in the office here. I've got a Hasbro Pulse character that's me as a Ghostbuster, right? Like,
Oh, neat.
and I'm not embarrassed by it. If I showed it to other people, they'd just go, I mean, whether it's my mom or my buddy, either one, they'd go, that's so funny. That's cool. I love it. Right. 20 years ago, that was not the case. That was just not where we were at as a culture. It was weird to have that stuff. And because that changed, and because we were so big on trying to make Lego a normal thing, like to bring back the pieces from nostalgia to
Mhm.
adults that they remembered as a kid, like, literally bringing out some of those archive sets, creating cool sets like this when none existed, creating the $300 3,000 piece huge Imperial Star Destroyer set that was the biggest that Lego had ever produced at that point, to create some, hey, this is for you, right? You're not just sort of hiding around the corner from the kids and stealing their Lego bricks to do your stuff. We're embracing it with cool product, and that was part of what we could bring to that, which allowed the fans to say, huh, I can come out of hiding, so to speak, right? I'm
Right.
out here doing cool stuff. if Lego's telling me that with their products that this is what I'm doing is great, why should I be hiding? And of
Mhm.
course, what happened? They got out there and started putting on more and more events and doing more and more user groups and buying more and more products and promoting it, in the in the media, right? One of my funniest days was about 2 years after I left Lego, I ran into the head of USPR, and he said, "Yeah, man, I think I got it wrong for a while. Remember that day that you came in my office and I was super mad? I mean, just fiery red, hot under the collar because one of the Lego fan groups had gotten themselves, without any help from me or the Lego company, had gotten themselves on the above the fold LA Times Sunday lifestyle section, one of the most viewed parts of that paper and one of the biggest papers in the world." And he was super mad, and I couldn't understand it because he had been working for 6 months to product place one of our new lines
Ah.
and couldn't get it in. And they were starting to say, well, maybe we'll do something about it. And then all of a sudden, boom, here's this thing that's just generic Lego. It's not product line X or product line Y. And he was so mad because he'd worked so hard to get this thing in that he was responsible for getting out there. And I was going, I don't understand the problem. Like this is great. We didn't pay, we didn't do anything, and it's self-sustaining. So we're
Mhm.
going to see more of this because now thousands of papers around the country are going to be allowed to, mentally anyway, put stuff like this in their papers too. And it's not for any single product line, it's for every product line. It took him a while to catch up, but those sorts of culture changes allow a whole lot of product purchase at this point, right? The amount of product line extensions and I mean, again, $300 was the biggest set to date when we built that Imperial Star Destroyer, and everybody told us there's no way you're going to sell any of those. We did it. Well, in the early days, we did 3 runs of 10,000 units that we sold out
Wow.
almost as soon as they were produced. Right, we showed up in the Times Square Toys R Us because they were like, "Oh, that's so amazing! We want one of those cool, unique things. Get it in there." All the retail people were telling us, "There's no way a box that big and that product that pricey will go into a store shelf. It just won't happen." And then it did, and they were like, "Oh, well, I'll be damned.
Mhm.
That's cool. Maybe we should do more of those." Right? And now, I mean, go to the shelf. They've got like 2 aisles at my own local Target of nothing but
Yep.
Lego,
Yeah,
and they're selling
absolutely.
all kinds of price points, right? Up to $200-300 worth of kits.
Yeah,
The Fender
I
Stratocaster, for instance.
yeah, I can't count the number of Legos in my, news feeds or my photo feeds come Christmas time, right? Or birthday time when
Right,
friends are, because my friends are
right,
buying for their kids and then they're buying for themselves. And it totally makes sense. I know
right.
you're doing a little bit of other work around kind of fostering nerdery, and that's probably why you started Dinner 5, is to kind of bring community nerdery together and really build that. Talk a little bit about what Dinner 5 is, and maybe what is something that you didn't expect when you started a community group for community professionals, but now you can't imagine the group without that.
Yeah. So let me give a little bit of history, and then I'll tell you about what the event is. So Dinner 5 is something I started just honestly for myself because I needed it, and I figured if I needed it, maybe some others did. Turns out that was absolutely true. But I've been running the event exactly 4 years next week, I believe. I think my first event was this time next week, 4 years ago. But the October and November before that, I had gone to 2 different local events. There was a lot of junior folks there and no senior folks. And at this point, I've been doing this 20 plus years. I do a lot of mentoring throughout the course of my day. For anybody listening, if you need help with something, my inbox is always open, jake@jakemckee.com. Drop me a line. I'll be happy to help out. But also, I wanted some mentoring, right? I wanted to be the person with the least experience in the room, not the most. Right? And I had gotten to the point where going to events almost seemed pointless because I wasn't really learning a lot and it was bothering me. And so I was complaining to a buddy of mine over the Christmas break, 2 days after Christmas, and said, God, I can't believe it. I want something more. And he goes, well, what would you want to do? And I said, I don't know, like 4 or 5 people around my kitchen table with pizza and beers and talking community nerd. And he goes, well, then do that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, maybe I should do that. And so after running it past a few other senior community leaders, here in Austin where I live. And, uh, over the course of the next week or so after, in that Christmas lull, um, hoping that one of them would say, "That's a great idea. I want to do it." None of them did that. They all went, "That's great. I want to be one of the first attendees when you start it." And so I was like, "All right, fine, I'll start it." And I thought I'd put a few events together. It'd be fun for a little while and then die off. But what ended up happening was in the beginning of 2019, I believe that's right. It started, had the first events, and uh, the first year was in person events, in half in Austin, half in cities elsewhere in the country, and it was a 5-person, 5-course meal, couple hours long, cone of silence conversations. There was no NDAs or anything like that, but it was cone of silence, right? Like meant to stay conversation in the room. And what really surprised me, partially to answer your question, was that almost immediately people who had never met each other had instant connection because they were all in that same spot that I was in. I don't have a group that I can open up with and talk with and share openly with about my successes, and with people who actually understand what that success is, or frustrations with people who understand why it's frustrating, right? And like so many professions, you go home and if you're a doctor and your spouse isn't a doctor, it's hard to then come home and talk about how difficult your day was when it came to the medical issue, right? um, it's kind of the same way with community. We were just coming home and not really having an ability to talk to those around us and go, "Yeah, we get you, we feel you," at a senior level, right? If you were more junior, sure, you got plenty of people to talk to, and open up to, and they kind of get where you're at. But if you're working at a brand in charge of a 100,000 person community, and you're working on budgets for the next year and having the struggles with it, who do you talk to, right? It was really tough. And so went for a year, in person, had a great time. Every event, everybody loved it. Said, "My God, I want to come back to the next one." And then, of course, shortly after that first year, here came the pandemic, and I changed to virtual. And I've been very proud to say that we've had food at every event. It's a connecting element, but we've had food at every event, even in March of 2020, when sending food to people was sort of like sending a dirty bomb. We got through those days. We transitioned, and I think what was most surprising to me is how much, there's a lot of social dynamic nerdery in here, but in those early days, the first 6 months or so, the first 3 or 4 months of doing dinner fives when the pandemic started, we got together because it was a safe space to say, "Oh my God, what's going to happen?" And that's kind of all we talked about. There was very little traditional community talk. It was just getting together with people who had similar similar dynamics in their world, right? They were running communities. That's what their job looked like. Therefore, they had these responsibilities. Therefore, they could just feel like they were with their people. They didn't talk a whole lot about it. They didn't say, "Are you running? Are you running one?" "Yeah, okay, cool. Therefore, we can talk." They
Yeah.
just showed up and knew that the vibe was right. And so we had a lot of conversations early on. It was just, I've called it the "Oh my God, are we all going to die" syndrome, right? Um, After probably 4 or 5 months, it shifted into, how long is this going to last? What is this? What are the implications? How are we going to manage through this? What's going to happen? And then it kind of morphed again into, I swear to God, I don't want to talk about the pandemic anymore. This is my reprieve to get away from that and really get specific about community. And now we've kind of gone back to more of a normal mix of life and community and business and all those sorts of things. But fascinating period of time for these 4 years. And in 2023, we're going to start making some changes. Every event so far has been 5 people, very specifically, so you can open up and feel really safe and closed in. The the very first non 5-person event is going to happen here in a couple of weeks, called Campfire Confessions, dinner 5 Campfire Confessions, and it's up to 20 people. I'm hoping to get the full 20 to register, and the goal is kind of passing the talking stick around the virtual circle, where each person there is going to get a chance to raise something, a question, a concern, a point of pride, a project they want to show off, whatever it is. Just share, and then I'm going to randomly pick 1 or 2 people throughout the audience to respond to them. So if it's a point of pride, That person may say, I want to know more. They may say, hey, congratulations. I need you to understand that's a big deal, whatever it might be. If it's a question, they might answer the question, or they might say, you need to talk to these people. We'll see how it goes. But we'll go around the circle as many times as we can in the 2 hours that we have to do it. But really trying to expand the idea of senior support for senior folks.
Awesome. I love that. And I just think it's so neat to see not only was something that you needed to bring into the world for you, but also you having experience creating and growing community. Like you kind of had the best of both worlds. Like, let's see if I can put this to the test a little bit. It maybe was
Right.
a little bit nerve-wracking for you to say like, okay, I can do this for big brands. Can I do it for a group of people that I really, really care about? So I think that's super fascinating. Jake, I so appreciate you taking the time today to jump on in just a couple days notice to join me on the brand new Brand to Fan show. I'd love to just finish our conversation today with a couple rapid fire questions that we ask everybody on the show. Are you ready?
I am. All right.
Okay, first one. What are you, Jake McKee? What are you a fan of today, right now? What are you a fan of?
I am a scale modeler. That's one of my many hobbies I do in my free time, such as it is. And I have been absolutely fascinated with a Facebook group called the Scale Modelers Critique Group, SMCG, and have really had a good time in that group in a way that I haven't had in online communities for a long time. Because of the way that just the vibe that creates, the support I've been able to get, the rapid fire nature of the questions getting answered, the way that it's being moderated, all the pieces have really been a lot of fun. So, it's less of a fan of a specific product and more of a fan of, really rejuvenating my interest in my passion for the hobby, not my interest. Even in this year that's been really busy and I haven't been able to get to the workbench and do a lot of stuff, I feel like I've been connected to the hobby, even when I'm away from the bench.
Absolutely. That definitely speaks to that emotional connection again, and kind of that loyalty piece of it. All right, Jake, do you have a favorite jersey or fan apparel or brand apparel in your closet that you just kind of, even if you just tuck it to the back, like you can't get rid of it?
Yes. So I have two outdoorsy shirts. If you know outdoorsy, they were a client of mine a couple of years back, and much to their credit, when they created their swag, they made nice swag. So it wasn't just crappy t-shirts that people go, oh, thanks, and then toss it away because they're scratchy, cheap shirts. They were that real nice poly blend. They fit wonderfully, and I've about worn holes in it because I just can't imagine getting rid of it. But it's funny to me because it's been a while since I've actually used the site to rent an RV or anything like that. But and it's been a while since I've worked with them. But I still pull that thing out every day. It feels like, and not every day, but feels like some days it's every day. I wear it frequently, and every time I do, I think about them and I think about them fondly because here I am using this thing that's super comfortable to wear. And every time I hit the workbench around the corner, that's one of my modeling shirts now because it's got holes in it and whatnot. So it's a good one to spill paint on. But it's an emotional connection back to that period of time and that brand and their efforts to really take care of me as a customer. When I was working, I grabbed one of the customer swag pieces, but those customers likely are thinking the same thing because it's not just some cheap piece of nonsense. It's something that really was nicely designed to spend an extra few dollars on. It was more meaningful, and that meaning lasted.
Yeah, it's paid off. I think it's funny. So it's something that you even gravitate now to because you can put paint on it, but at some level, that's a sense of comfort. Like you're doing one of your favorite things in the world. You're wearing one of your favorite pieces of clothing in the world. I totally believe that we are what we wear. And that speaks volumes there. Jake, how can listeners and viewers of Brand to Fan Show, how can they follow you in your work? What's a way that they can connect with you?
Yeah, so I've got three sites. My Jake McKee consulting site, so just jakemckee.com, MCKEE.com. That's my main business site. From there, you can get to the dinner5.org site. So dinner5.org if you want to sign up for an event upcoming. And then kind of one of my other fun side projects is the Confessions of a Community Manager webcomic that I create is just for fun. There's some fun community management, community industry, cartoon strips, comic strips that we do. My friend Greg Highland, who's an amazing artist I worked with back in my Lego days, he creates the comics, I write the comics, and then usually have some sort of essay around community attached to it. But just a fun way to get community stuff across instead of more words. It's more imagery instead. But and that's at confessionsofacommunitymanager.com.
I love that. Well, there are 3 good ways if you are a fan of Jake McKee, like I am, to stay connected with him and his work. Thank you again, Jake, for joining me today on the Brand to Fan Show. This is the podcast that unpacks the phenomenon of fandom to help you build for the future by creating more fans. We'll put the links that Jake mentioned and some of the other reference points from the show notes for this and every episode on the brandtofan.show webpage. So it's not .com, it's just brandtofan.show. If you like what you're hearing here on the brand new podcast, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. And please, in the nature of community, like pass it on, share it, create an emotional moment and pass it on with someone. My name is Lauren Teague. I am the host of Brand to Fan and the founder of Fan Wagon, and we will talk to you next time.